Welcome back. Your time is 4:39. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GBNews. Now, has the Pope gone woke? Well, that's the big question, because in his first interview since becoming the head of the Catholic Church in May, Leo XIV claimed that the widening pay gap between corporate bosses, such as Elon Musk, and ordinary working people is to blame for growing divisions and instability around the world. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by the co-host of the Catholic Unscripted podcast, Gavin Ashenden. Gavin, always a pleasure to have your company. You know, I'd heard about St. Mark, but I hadn't heard about St. Marxist. What on earth is the Pope doing getting involved in having a pop at capitalism?
Martin, you know, I think the game's changed over the last 20 years, 25 years. So as I was growing up, there was an argument between capitalism and socialism, and I think the argument's resolved now. Socialism drives people broke. Look at what's happened in Argentina. Look at what's happening in Britain today. Yeah, so the argument has won. I think the Pope's making a different point. So when, in order to prepare to talk to you, I thought I better discover what all the facts are. It turns out that the top 1% of the population own 50% of the wealth, and the bottom 50% of the population own less than 2% of the wealth. I mean, that's a disparity that's crazy. So my guess is that the capitalism that I always thought had correctives built into it doesn't seem to be exercising those correctives anymore. So that's a problem. Is the alternative socialism? Absolutely not. But what can be done for capitalism to make it more fair or work in a less worse way than it's working at the moment? And I think that's what the Pope is asking us to think about, because it requires some of our best minds, because the consequences are otherwise social disintegration. And that, you know, he's perfectly entitled to talk about that. I don't think it's a left-right thing anymore. I think it's a, how do we make this broken thing work better?
Gavin Ashenden, of course, there'll be the immediate criticism of people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. More to the point, people in gilt cages shouldn't throw stones. The Vatican is the ultimate gilt golden cage. The Catholic Church, we don't know its true value, we can only guess. But it was estimated in 2023 it could be as high as $73 billion worldwide. The Vatican Bank itself made 30 million euros in profit in 2023. They own 5,000 churches. I put it to you, if the Pope's serious about wealth redistribution, he's got a few billion quid of his own he could give away.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a misapprehension a lot of people share. First of all, the Vatican and the Catholic Church collects beauty. It doesn't collect wealth. Now, some people put a value on beauty. They can if they want. I think to say that because it owns churches where Christians meet to worship God and give him thanks, that makes them rich. It might do on paper, but it's got nothing to do with actually being rich. Actually, my sources tell me the Vatican's almost broke. There's been a nasty financial scandal in there. It needs to clean that up. And I hear that they're having trouble paying their bills. So with all due respect, I hear what you say, but I think there was a piece of rhetoric that doesn't really describe the situation. And the other thing is because the Pope owns nothing. I mean, he's a poor man. If he wanted to give all the wealth of the church, if he wanted to sell all the churches and to sell all the historical artifacts, he couldn't. It's not within his power. He's not able to do it. I don't think there's anyone able to do it in the organisation. It's in the same way you can't disestablish the Church of England because no one can work out how to cut the knots. The church can't give away its historical artifacts. What it ought to do is to use them for beauty, but also it ought to act responsibly. 1.4 billion people are Catholics, and if the Pope says you need to pay attention to the way you use your wealth, we ought to listen, because we're not doing it very well.
But is it really the Pope's job to be acting, I don't know, like some sort of Jeremy Corbyn in a gown?
Oh, well, good point. I'm closer to you on this than almost anything else. I think I'm very hesitant when priests, bishops, and even popes talk about economics, because that's not their area of expertise. But you see, I'm not trying to win an argument. I really do think the game has changed. I don't think this is a South American Pope wagging his finger at the capitalist West anymore. I think that any sensible person with a responsibility for a worldwide following ought to say, look, we're too close to the edge of this cliff of social instability. You cannot have 1% of the population controlling 50% of the wealth, and the other 50% so completely disenfranchised that they have no hope. I think he's talking about human nature and hope and mutuality. He's allowed to do that. The fact that he can't avoid talking about economics isn't his fault. It's just that the way you describe the world and our investment in it has an economic language attached to it.
Gavin Ashenden, is a lot of this wokery that we see because of historic guilt? We hear a lot about white guilt, about the guilt of the empire. Could this be Catholic guilt? I mean, in the past, of course, the Catholic Church was vastly wealthy, has a checkered history with things like slavery in South America. Is this a bit of self-flagellation, a bit of hair shirt wearing by the pontiff?
Well, you offer me an open goal, because I'd like to say to you that the Catholic Church and Christianity, like no other, has persuaded people to be generous and to give their money away. The Catholic Church and Christianity is forever teaching that money does you no good. And it has one of the greatest records of philanthropy. So we win on that. I'm absolutely happy about that. Is it wokery? Yes, it is, because the language of our culture is all about a pseudo equality. We're not talking about that. We're talking about trying to give everyone a share in the investment of a corporate venture. But one of the things we ought to celebrate is competence. The Catholic Church commends itself to people on spiritual competence because it changes people's lives. It changes greedy people into generous people, guilty people into innocent people, forgiven people. It's one of the greatest forces for transformation in our culture. You can't put a monetary value on it. We're not talking about money. So we're talking about spiritual competence. And one reason I'm a Catholic is because I love the way the Catholic Church has transformed society so much for the better, despite its critics who try and give it a bad name.
Okay, Gavin Ashenden, I always enjoy our chats. I sincerely do. Thank you very much for coming on the show today and sharing your knowledge. I really appreciate it. Thank you, mate. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Lovely. Now, if you search some holiday